Okay, we are broadcasting. You got your recorder up?
I do.
3, 2, 1, record. Welcome to the latest episode of the DLF. Welcome to the latest edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I am your host this week, Dan Myler. We are without our guy, Ryan McDowell, who's having some connection difficulties. He's in the middle of a storm tonight. So myself and Matt Price will be flying duo, I guess, rather than trio. Matt, just me and you this week, but we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we do. We'll miss him. And I do want to take a moment real quick to shout out to Ryan. He said he included me in one of those inner circle tweets that was going around this past weekend. And a lot of people said a lot of nice things about me. So I just want to say thanks to him and to everybody else, John Bosch and some others that were very nice to me on Twitter this week, which is, sometimes Twitter can be a dirty place. So thank you guys for being nice.
Yeah, no doubt it can be. And I think all of us have caught some of that flack in the past. It's always nice to catch the other side of that conversation. Ryan mentioned me as well, and I'm equally as thankful for sure. Let's get into what we're going to talk about this week, Matt. Instead of going with the regular route, what we've been doing through most of the regular season, we decided to turn our attention slightly towards the postseason. We're going to talk about as many players as we can in the time that we have and try to nail down how trustworthy that player is. Now, some of these guys might have injury concerns. Others might not be playing up to the level we thought they did at the beginning of the year. And some on the other side of the spectrum would be overproducing from what we thought just a couple of months ago. So, the playoffs are right around the corner. So we want to know who we trust. And, assuming we're in a relatively deep league like the three of us regularly play in, 12 teams with 9 or 10 minimum starters without your kicker and defense, we're going to try to nail down if these guys, if we trust them or how much we trust them as we inch closer to our postseasons. I think the best position to start off with tonight, Matt, is the running back position because there are a lot of question marks there. Let's start with a guy who came back from injury in week 10 and had a really big game. We're all talking a little bit this week about Leonard Fournette. He's the running back 65 in total points so far this season. Of course, that injury kept him out of so many games and left a lot of dynasty owners scratching their heads thinking about what they're going to do with him moving forward. He was a top 5 tailback in week 10. Matt, how trustworthy is Leonard Fournette? Is he an RB1 or would you rather have him as an RB2 going forward?
I think RB2. I think I'm honestly going to take this quote unquote big game to take an opportunity to sell him if I can. I think there is some merit in waiting to see if he has another big game and really gets back, kind of bounces back completely to that late first, early second round value. But he's got the Steelers coming up this week. He's got another tough matchup here in week 12 against the Bills run defense. So, I don't know if he's going to have another one of these big explosion games before the playoffs hit. And I just don't trust him. I mean, what was something like 20 something carries for 50 something yards? Like, it just wasn't a great performance. I feel like he's lost a lot. We're always going to be dealing with this nagging lower body injury, leg, ankle, whatever it might be. It just seems like there's always something with Leonard Fournette. And I just don't trust him. Maybe that's wrong. I don't trust the offense. I don't trust Blake Bortles. I don't really trust the coaching staff, to be honest with you at this point. So I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and get out at this point. If I can get an early first and something on top, maybe a second also on top of that, then I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to sell Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, the one thing that makes me hesitate with that is the usage. You mentioned the 24 carries. Yeah, the efficiency wasn't really there, but he's getting 24 carries where Carlos Hyde only gets 3. So it appears to us, it should at least, that he's going to get the bulk of the workload and maybe really all of that workload going forward. Again, if that doesn't turn into more than 2 yards a carry as it did in week 10, we're going to have some problems going forward. Now, that all doesn't mean that I'm ready to trust him as my RB1 and be thrilled about putting him in my lineup as my best tailback. Obviously, if you're contending for a title and he was somebody you were building around, that is a guy that you're expecting to have in your lineup and expecting to put up relatively big numbers. I don't know if we're going to be able to count on the point total that we had in week 10. You mentioned the tough defenses, Pittsburgh, Buffalo. Down the stretch, it looks a little bit better. Washington's run defense has been a little better, but they also get Miami in this stretch and Indianapolis. I'm not expecting running back one numbers going forward, but I think he's still a top 24 tailback and still a guy you want in your lineup. And if you've survived him being on your bench for this many weeks while he was hurt and you're still that contender, you're probably in pretty good shape, but you probably have some tough decisions because you were obviously filling that spot with a good player.
Yeah, absolutely. I just don't trust them. Again, week 14 of the first week of the playoffs, the Titans, pretty tough run defense. Week 15, they have another, like the Redskins, like you were saying, they are at home. And if you can make it to the finals, you get Miami in week 16 on the road. So if you can make it there, I think you'll get another good start out of him. But I think this is purely a volume play. And basically, if you don't get a touchdown out of it, I think you're going to be pretty disappointed about what you get out of Fournette right now. And certainly disappointed if you spent that late first round, early second round pick on him in a startup draft.
Completely agree. There are dynasty owners, myself included, that have a nice fill-in from the season that, in one spot I had Fournette, happened to get Phillip Lindsay in free agency following a rookie draft, and I've been trotting him out there. I wanted to last week, but he was on bye, so I started Fournette. I'm strongly considering going back to Lindsay once again this coming week because we really didn't see that much from him last week. Of course, big point totals wasn't because of really good numbers when you look at every carry. Let's move on to the next guy, Derrick Henry, running back 42 overall right now in total points. Back-to-back weeks finding pay dirt, Matt. Trustworthy as an RB2, maybe a flex, or are you even on board with that?
If you start 10 with 4 flexes, then maybe, but I think he's like a fringe running back 4, running back 3 right now, honestly. I think no matter what's happened the last 2 weeks in terms of the touchdown department, I think that Dion Lewis looks 10 times better than he does, both between the tackles and obviously as a receiver. So I don't really trust him at all. Another guy that you're going to need a touchdown from to be happy with that production week to week.
Yeah, and we've seen that the last couple of weeks. In fact, there were 2 of them last week. So anybody that had to put him into a lineup, and I really do believe it's to that point where if you're forced to start Henry, you're not feeling real good about your matchup that week. You're obviously having trouble with injuries or buys. Like you said, you're hoping he falls into the end zone and gets you those points. I'm not rushing to get Henry into my lineup. I asked about the flex. Not even trustworthy as a flex at this point. Maybe that offense will pick things up and he'll consistently get goal line carries, but I don't know if anybody really see that as something that's going to come to fruition anytime soon. Moving on to another tailback that has struggled with some injuries, Dalvin Cook of the Vikings, running back 62. Of course, he missed a lot of time, but came back before the bye for the Vikings last week and had a nice run, showed some things that probably have dynasty owners nodding their head and feeling a little bit better. I don't know if I trust him as an RB1 right now, Matt. Maybe that'll change going forward if he has one more big game, if he gets a big workload this coming week in week 11. How do you feel about Cook going forward?
I've been down on him all year. I mean, like everybody, because of the injuries mostly. But he really impressed me last week when he was on this is supposed, or I guess 2 weeks ago at this point, on that supposed snap count, right? And I missed an opportunity to buy him when I had a chance, and I regret that already. I do think he's going to be rough, from a consistency basis, just based on all these injuries that he had all the way dating back to early in college. But he looked really good the last time we saw him, and I think he's right there at the running back 12, maybe down to 14 or 15. So somewhere in there, I think that he's close to that running back one trustworthy range for us. And he's got a decent schedule coming up. So yeah, I'm on board with that. If you can buy him, buy him. If you can get him for, a first and right around that same range where we're trying to sell Leonard Fournette, maybe a first and a second. It might take 2 firsts to do it at that point. I think they would have to be mid to late for me to consider it. But yeah,
Oh.
Hello?
Yeah. Did you drop out and then come right back in or what?
It said error. It wasn't a connection error, but yeah, I'm back. I finished that whole thing on Cook though, so you can just leave this back in there.
Okay. What was your final point?
That I'm on board with buying him for the stretch run.
Okay, I heard the start of that.
Okay.
So I'll just keep it going. Our backup's still going. I don't know if I feel like I'm willing to run out there and buy him. The injuries still scare me, and I think we've talked about that a lot right here on the podcast. When he's on the field, I feel great about trotting him out there every week. When he's injured, it just continues to remind me of what was going on in college, what my fears were when he was coming out of school and into the draft. The 10 carries for 89 yards and the big run in week 9 against Detroit. He also caught a few passes, 4 passes for 20 yards. So he got those touches when they said he was going to be limited. That's a really encouraging sign. So if you're asking me if I'm excited because he's on my roster and I'm making a run, absolutely. If you're asking me if I want to give up a couple of first-round picks for Dalvin Cook, I'm extremely hesitant. Maybe like you said, late picks, I can probably get on board, but I'm a little bit shook up when I start thinking about giving up multiple firsts for a guy with his injury history. Again, I'm ready to make him a fringe running back one if I already got him on my team and I'm looking to win games down the stretch here. And
the one thing I will say, a little feather in his cap, I think, is in weeks 15 and 16 in the playoffs here. He's got the Dolphins at home in week 15. And in week 16, he gets the Lions, who everybody is running over right now. So I kind of like that for him. That one is on the road, but it's in a dome, so I'm not that worried about it. So as long as that health stays, he stays on the field, then I think that he could be a part of a lot of championship teams here. So
yeah, leading up to that, they're at Chicago, they got Green Bay, at New England, and at Seattle. So some landmines along the way for sure. But I agree with you. There are some tasty matchups after that. Quickly, Matt, what about Latavius Murray? Knowing now that Dalvin Cook is a part of that offense, do you have any trust that he has any standalone value at this point?
I think there's a chance. I mean, if they are really going to if they want to keep Cook healthy, it seems like they want to keep somebody else involved and maybe a little bit bigger role than just like a change of pace guy, a guy that's going to give Cook some breathers, So I think there's a decent chance that Murray still sees maybe not 10 carries in a game with Cook on the field, but maybe 10 total touches each week and cuts in a little bit with Cook getting in the 15 range. I still think that's a pretty pass-oriented offense, and I guess that could change as we go on stretches, some colder weather and get into, football weather, I guess. Then that could change, but I really think that they want to keep him healthy and on the field, and that Murray should remain, maybe not a full-blown committee, but at least more than a change of pace kind of guy.
Yeah, what you said there, though, there was a lot of I think and they should.
Yeah.
There's no guarantees that
there's not
what happens. I'm leery of it for sure, and I probably want to wait a week, see how he's used against Chicago before trotting him out there, especially if I need a win this week. Another running back we should talk about is Mark Ingram, running back 45, despite the suspension to start the season. 5 weeks on the field so far, Matt. He's had 2 big games, one, average game, and then 2 complete duds for dynasty owners. Are you expecting him to deliver consistent running back 2 numbers going forward, or are you using him as more of a flex? we want him in our lineup still, right?
I think he's almost the perfect flex. You know, I would rather not trust him as a running back too. I think you probably can as a low end running back too, just because of the offense he's involved in. I think he's going to have a good opportunity for a touchdown every week, depending on how much Kamara gets there. But yeah, I'm on board with this. I don't know if I'm buying him per se, but if I have him, I'm holding and starting him, because I just don't think you're going to get really much value out of him at this point.
And with his value this past offseason, a lot of owners did buy him to be their running back 3, that guy that's a little bit farther down on the depth chart, because other owners, or many owners anyway, were concerned about that suspension and how he would come back from it, especially after Kamara got his opportunity to be the guy to shine. Now, all those things happened, and now Ingram, 40% of the time, has been a monster for dynasty owners. So I think at the very least, he's a guy that dynasty owners want in their lineup, which makes him an obvious flex. And really, even in a pinch, he can be, like you said, low-end running back 2 with the upside to put up really high-end running back 1 numbers in that offense. Let's move on to James White. Obviously, been amazing for dynasty owners everywhere, especially when you consider price and what you had to give to get him on your roster. Currently a top 10 running back, regardless of your scoring settings. Is there any reason, Matt, that we should expect less than running back 1 numbers going forward?
Yeah, I think we had a really, really fun stretch of games there with James White producing tons of touchdowns, but I am skeptical it's going to continue going forward as long as Sony Michel is healthy. We saw while Michel was out, James White get 11, in addition to all the receiving game work. Don't let me wrong, that's still going to be there. But in addition to the receiving game work while Michel was out, he had 11 carries, 8 carries, 12 carries. Michel back last week against Tennessee down to 1 carry. With Michel getting 11 of those. So I think that he's still going to have a nice PPR floor for us. And, you know, some upside, obviously, with the touchdowns he's been producing this year and how Brady's like to go to him in that area of the field. But in terms of like absolute upside as a running back 1, I think those days could be behind us for this season as long as Michel is healthy.
Yeah, you're right there. It certainly hinges on the health of the rookie. The one thing, saving grace maybe for dynasty owners, is that most of us expected him only to be useful as a flex and only in PPR leagues. I think that role will continue. Now, last week they fell behind, and he still, not only, but he still caught just 5 passes for 31 yards. That was a role that usually you'd expect those maybe even double-digit catch games out of James White, and it didn't happen. It's only 1 week, I understand. I'm a little bit leery like you. I would be surprised if he has many more running back 1 numbers with Michel staying healthy, if that happens. I guess we shouldn't be shocked if he has 1 or 2 where he scores a couple times. I'm not even convinced, especially in like half PPR or in non-PPR, if he's even all that useful. Maybe more towards a flex bottom of the your starting roster, starting lineup.
Yeah, because if he comes up with these, 6 for 50 games, that's great in a PPR, but in a standard league, you're not super excited about 5 points there. So yeah, safe floor in PPR. Dan, let me ask you this: for the last several weeks, he's been bought and sold for late first round picks. Are you selling for that right now? Are you getting out based on the wave, or are you going to continue to hold for the playoffs there?
It obviously it's going to depend on your roster and if you can fill the hole even with something useful. But in a vacuum, I'm selling if that price is the 10th pick in the draft. I'd much rather have that. I think broadcasting to 2019 and beyond, it's pretty obvious that coaching staff in New England wants to give Sony Michel a big role, wants to make him a key part of that offense. Now, there'll always be room for that pass catcher, of course, but when you have a chance to shine a nickel and get a dime back, you go get your dime. So I'm going to go get James or sell James White if I can get a first. If it's a second, though, and I need a guy for that role, I'm probably holding at this point and hoping White continues to make an impact on that offense. Philip Lindsay is another guy that, interesting. All season long, there's been something to talk about when it comes to Philip Lindsay. And we all know his story by now, but he's a running back too in every setting in fantasy football. And he's only had one game under 10 points in PPR, which was the one that he got thrown out of. Are you, Matt, anticipating these consistent running back 2 numbers to continue through the rest of the season and fantasy playoffs?
I absolutely am. I don't see any reason why we should downgrade him at all. He's proven he can do it both with and without Royce Freeman there. I don't think that really matters in terms of his workload. Maybe it caps his upside a little bit with him there. But even when he was gone, they brought in Booker to play a bigger role. So I think he's just going to be this guy that they're going to, I don't want to say manage his touches, but he's not going to be a bell cow kind of guy, but he's a guy who doesn't need a bell cow kind of role to do that. And he's definitely I guess it's maybe a toss-up depending on how you feel about Booker's receiving skills. I know that's kind of his calling card, but I would say he's the best receiving back on the roster for Denver, and I don't see too many games where they're going to be playing from ahead, which to me says more Phillip Lindsay and less Royce Freeman, at least for the rest of 2018.
Yeah, and you mentioned Freeman being out of those games. When Freeman was gone, in his last 3 games, Lindsay has piled up 15 touches, then 21, then 19. So he's a trustworthy tailback. They obviously are willing to give him the ball and the bulk of the carries if the situation makes it necessary. And, if that coaching staff is going to trust him for that kind of workload, even before that, he was averaging right around 15 carries a game. If you take out that game where he was ejected, that's a nice workload, whether you're a rookie or a 10th year veteran. So I'm with you. I'm expecting him to hover right around that mid RB2 level and continue to pile up 15 points a week. A nice guy to have even in your RB2 spot. A lot of us are playing him in our flex, and that's a luxury at this point. On to Aaron Jones of our Packers, Matt, running back 33 to this point. Didn't get any usage early in the season. Recently, that has spiked quite a bit. In fact, in week 10, 74% of the snaps this past week, and came up big, had that nice game Dynasty owners have been waiting for. How much trust Aaron Jones at this point? And are you as excited about his upside for Dynasty owners as I am at this point?
We could have an hour-long discussion on how we could trust Mike McCarthy to do anything. I'm sure you and I, Dan. I don't know how he could be put back in the bag at this point. It's clear, it's night and day, the touches that he gets versus Jamal Williams or any other back on that roster at this point. So I hope to see him continue this, give him, at least 15 carries a game. That may be a little bit strong, I guess, but somewhere in that 12 to 15 range of carries would be pretty ideal, I think. And obviously we would want more, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think he's going to have to continue to be efficient in his carries, and we've seen no sign of him slowing down in that regard. So I'm excited about it. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to boycott the team if they stop giving him the ball. So keep Aaron happy. Let's keep Jones on the field, and let's go get that playoff spot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It was crazy as I was watching that football game against the Dolphins. Jamal Charles got a carry in the 4th quarter, and I was watching it with a fellow Packer fan. I said, I don't think I've seen Jamal Charles on the field. I was actually surprised Jamal Williams. Holy cow. Blast from the past. I wish they had prime Jamal Charles. But in the 4th quarter, Williams got that carry. And I thought to myself and even said to my friend, I think that's the first time I've seen him all game. And it wasn't, obviously, but he didn't make any kind of impact, Williams I'm talking about. And Jones just looks so much more explosive. Williams had 3 carries for 3 yards. It's been obvious to all Packers fans and many Dynasty owners that Jones is the guy that should be in that backfield. I think we saw the passing of the torch officially. Jones even fumbled in that game, and I still have a very strong feeling that Aaron Jones will get close to 20 touches a game. He got 18 last week, turned him into 165 plus yards and a couple of scores. Seems like a potential running back 2 down the stretch, and maybe even running back 1 upside if that Packers offense gets things figured out. Let's take a shift, Matt, over to the wide receiver position. Lots of guys to talk about here as well. Some overachievers, some underachievers. Let's try to sort this out as we get into getting ready for these playoff lineups that we're gonna set down the stretch here. We'll start with the elder statesman, one of the guys that we talk about every year at this point. Seems like regularly he turns things on for us in the postseason. Of course, that's Larry Fitzgerald. He's only wide receiver 48, barely a wide receiver 4 at this point. Only one 15-point game this season, dealing with that rookie quarterback. Can we trust him down the stretch here, Matt, to even be in our lineups in a 10-starter league?
I think so. I think he's going to provide wide receiver 3 numbers going forward. We saw that this offense under the new reign of Byron Leftwich decided they wanted to run their offense through, surprise, surprise, their best 2 players in Larry Fitzgerald and David Johnson. So I think so. I think if I can go out and buy Fitzgerald for like a 3rd round pick right now, and I have a hole at my wide receiver 3, or even I guess a flex spot, then I'm willing to go ahead and do that for the rest of the season for Fitzgerald. So I think I'm going to put him in the trustworthy category.
Yeah, I trust him too a little bit. For some of the things you said, for sure, I think the change at offensive coordinator is a nice change, and there has been some results from that already. I agree with you that they decided we have a couple of good players on this offense. Let's try to get them the football. And then also, he's done it for so many years. I don't think he's going to sit idly by late this season at all. I trust the guy, and especially if he's the last guy in your starting lineup. If right now you're starting somebody that you're really not feeling good about, a trade like you mentioned, giving a 3rd for Larry Fitzgerald, if you're a true contender, seems like a no-brainer to me, especially if you can't do any better on the trade market as a trading deadline inches closer here. Amari Cooper, he is. I wish we had Ryan this week. I really did.
I know.
I've talked to Ryan about a lot of things, including Cooper on many times, and every time he sticks to the theory, anything for Amari. And now we're starting to see a couple of nice games, 13 plus points in PPR now that he's arrived with the Cowboys. Very inconsistent in Oakland, but we have to go, Matt, by what he's done with this new team in this new offense, right? I think we have to trust him as a wide receiver 2 going forward.
Yeah, and I think this is the week right now before this weekend's game against Atlanta, who we all know what the passing games have been like against that team. I think right now is the time to go out and get him. If you have somebody that's still skeptical, maybe you've been burned all season long, maybe even last season too, and you can pry him away for a mid-first, I'd be going out and doing that everywhere I can right now. So yeah, I definitely agree there. It's kind of the same argument as we thought about in Oakland. Like, he's the main target. Everybody's out of the way. There's no one really else to throw the ball to. But it's actually happening in Dallas. And with the way Zeke Elliott looks, they can't just kind of concentrate on any one kind of player in that offense right now. So I really like what we've seen from Cooper these last 2 weeks. He seems motivated to prove that it was a situation and not him. So yeah, please go out and buy him. Start him against Atlanta this week. I think he could have a huge game this weekend, and after that point, I think that buy low window is going to be closed.
And dynasty owners that are just looking at the box score saying, well, against Philly, 6 for 75, the game before against Tennessee, 5 for 58. There are a couple of Dak Prescott horrible throws away from Cooper putting up wide receiver 1 numbers over the last couple of games. So those of you that watched that football game, especially on Monday night, will look at that, or maybe it was Sunday night. On Sunday night it was, should have seen those overthrows and thought to themselves, wow, man, the route running was sharp. He seemed to have that get off that we all liked of him getting or coming out of college. The real Amari Cooper is about to stand up here. And I agree with you, Matt. I think we're going to see the real deal down the stretch, and he's going to help a lot of dynasty owners make something of this season for sure. Doug Baldwin, wide receiver 89, also struggled with injuries, poor play, you could say maybe. Only one 12-point game in PPR so far, Matt, for Doug Baldwin. No games over 16 points just yet. Can we trust him in our lineup if we're chasing a title right now?
Again, I think we're in this wide receiver 3 flex range with him. I think there are worse starts, but he certainly has not done anything to really make us confident in him this season. It's kind of a travesty what they're doing in Oakland and in Oakland too, but also in Seattle. They have Russell Wilson, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and they're just intent on continuing to run the ball with guys like Chris Carson. Rashad Penny finally got on the field and did something this past week, and so it just seems like this is their MO. They don't want to use Wilson for what he's good at. They don't want to let him scramble around, find the open receiver, and put up some big passing numbers here. So I'm a little bit skeptical. I was super excited about Baldwin this year and thought we might see a special season out of him, but those injuries and then the way they wanted to run their offense this season kind of killed that for us. But I still feel like I want to have him as a wide receiver 3 kind of flex start each week in a lineup. I think you can do a lot worse than that just based on his ability and what he can do should they need to open up the passing offense. So I'm skeptically on board still with Doug Baldwin.
Yeah, I'm skeptical for sure as well. It's been really up and down. We've had a few games of 2 or less catches. The injury is obviously a factor, and there was news this week that Baldwin himself said he's over the knee issues, that he feels like himself again. I'm not sure if that's really taken in context. Maybe somebody asked him directly, how's the knee? It's not like Doug Baldwin is going to stand up and say, "Wow, it really hurts. It's affecting my play." So we'll see how it goes going forward. I think I have the same concerns as you with that Seattle offense. I have no reason to feel that's going to change anytime soon. The schedule down the stretch is really up and down. They have some nice matchups, some tough ones, but I feel like it's favorable going forward. So if we're trotting him out there, I'm kind of like you with Fitzgerald. I want him as maybe the last guy in your starting lineup. If you're trotting him out there as a wide receiver 2 and maybe even a wide receiver 3, though, I'm concerned about that lineup, and we're not going to see that kind of production unless something drastic changes with that offense.
They get San Francisco twice, week 13 and 15, and KC in week 16. And I know the Kansas City defense has been playing better lately, but that seems like a shootout game to me in the fantasy championship. So I think there's a decent reason to be a little bit positive about Baldwin for the rest of the season.
Yeah, things to be optimistic about for sure. You should temper your expectations and not expect huge production, though, for sure.
No, I think like if we can get 8 to 10 points out of him as a wide receiver 3 flex with the opportunity to get more in these bigger games, then I think I'm okay with that as a flex.
Yeah, he hasn't found the end zone yet, and that doesn't seem like even a 70% Doug Baldwin, if that's what he is, and he claims to be at 100%. That guy should score a couple times. So he's going to regress to the mean and find the end zone at least a couple times down the stretch. So maybe there's cause for optimism going forward. Allen Robinson, cause for optimism there as well. Wide receiver 43 right now. The injury cost him couple games, up and down first half of his first season with the Bears for sure, Matt, but returned from injury this past week. He scored 30 plus fantasy points in the game. Is he trustworthy as a consistent wide receiver 2?
See, you threw that consistent word in there.
Yeah.
This offense feels like it's going to, with under Matt Nagy, and it's ideal for them, honestly, is to go with a specific game plan each week. And this week they could do whatever they wanted, basically. It was a little bit of a joke of a game there. So I don't know, man. I want to trust him, but I don't really. I think I can trust him for certainly as kind of maybe a low end wide receiver 2 if you're really pushing it. But I think he's more of a top 25 play more instead of a top 20 play each week at this point. I know that's just outside the wide receiver 2 range, but if we're gonna create these lines in the sand, I think I'd feel a lot more comfortable with him if he was my third best option at that position, starting in a 3 wide receiver league.
Yeah, the big game was nice. 6 catches, 133 yards, and the 2 scores. Like you said, though, that offense could do whatever they want. Anthony Miller pretty much replicated that line, 5 for 122 and 1 score. So I don't know if those opportunities are going to be quite as frequent as we probably all hope. He's got Minnesota. They got to play the Rams still. Other than that, they have some nice matchups for sure. Detroit, the Giants, the Packers, San Francisco in our championship week. So there's going to be opportunities for Allen Robinson to have these big games. And I think there's at least one or two still to come considering those matchups. Everybody that listens to this podcast knows I'm a really big Allen Robinson fan. He showed a lot of the things, the 50-50 balls that he caught in week 10. Those are the things we all loved about him when he was in Jacksonville, putting up those big numbers. I'm optimistic for sure. I'm willing to trust him as a wide receiver 2 going forward. That consistent word makes you a little bit leery for sure. Man, he's a good player though. And even though it's Trubisky throwing him the ball, I still want him catching it.
I want to say, and who knows, he could blow this out of the water, but I want to say if you want to buy Allen Robinson, don't buy him right now, obviously off the big game, but this week against Xavier Rhodes, if he does it against Xavier Rhodes, then go ahead and well, maybe sell if he does it against Xavier Rhodes, but certainly if he struggles against him like I think he will this week, then go ahead and buy him. I think if you can get him for that mid first range, then I think he's certainly a buy if you can get him there.
Well, if he has another game like he did in week 10 this coming weekend, that price is going to go up for sure.
No, I'm selling. If he has a huge game this week, I'm selling for sure. Yeah,
no doubt. All right. Tyler Boyd. Talk about guys with low expectations coming into the season. I think he's the poster boy for that, Matt. And then coming through huge for dynasty owners that had him pegged as a bench space all year long. They're wide receiver 7 on a lot of teams. AJ Green gets hurt. Even before that, though, Boyd is going off. He's putting up wide receiver 2 numbers right now. He's the wide receiver 14 for the season. We can trust him to continue to put up these numbers, right, Matt?
I mean, I think we're going to see how he fares against number 1 quarterbacks now with AJ Green out. He played really well against the Saints last week, just 4 targets, but capitalized on those with 3 for 65. So he's been very impressive. My dynasty teams cut him in a ton of places as like the final cut last offseason. So that's sad. But yeah, I think
horrible owner, Matt.
He was the last guy on the roster. So many places, man. It was a bloodbath for Tyler Boyd this offseason on my teams. But yeah, I think it's tough. I don't think he's that alpha receiver. I think you really need someone drawing that big coverage across from him. So we're going to see this week against Baltimore. That's going to be a really tough test for him. If he excels there, then I think we have some decent matchups coming up. No really great matchups, I don't think, the rest of the year, but all winnable, kind of middle of the road kind of games. Oakland in week 15 is nice. At Cleveland, they're starting to play really well, so that's a little bit sketchy. But AJ Green should be back by then, and I think at that point we can trust him again. So I think these next 2 games are going to be pretty rough, but he's impressed pretty much everyone. I don't know how you couldn't be impressed with what he's done so far this season. So I think he's trustworthy. Just a couple of tough weeks coming up.
Yeah, and every player has that. Julio Jones has games where he only catches a few balls. So I'm not about to compare Boyd to Julio Jones or anything like that, but a few years ago he was that guy in the second round that I was picking up all over, and luckily it's nothing more than luck. I kept the faith with him and kept him as that wide receiver 7 or 8 on all those teams. And by the time week 3 came around, we knew we had to start him, and I have ever since. I'm not pulling him out of any lineups, regardless of the matchup. Obviously he is a lot better when he has that deep threat on the other side. He's got the number 2 corner guarding him, not seeing any double coverage, and just kills on those crosses and those deep overs and all that stuff. So, I like Boyd. I like Boyd going forward next offseason in the places I don't have him, especially if he doesn't blow up down the stretch here. I'm going to be looking to add him because, I like what he does and what he offers, especially in that offense with Andy Dalton as his quarterback. He's going to get targets. He's going to put up numbers. He's going to have those big games, and we've seen a few of them already this season. If you're asking me about 2018, keep putting him out there. You're probably playing him really as your 4th or 5th wide receiver in your starting lineup, or maybe he filled in for a guy who's underperforming or hurt. Either way, feel good about having that guy in your lineup because he's still going to get those targets and still going to get those catches. 3 for 65, maybe not exactly what you thought a week ago, sans AJ Green, but man, I was watching that game. Like the first play of the game, he hit for a 20-yard gain, and I was like, well, I don't think I have to worry about Boyd. He didn't do a lot after that, but man, I feel good about having him in my lineup. Another guy I feel really good about having in my lineup, Matt, and I know you do. You would too if you had him anywhere. It's Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 21 right now. He's certainly been up and down, but those ups have been fun to watch. 4 games of 16-plus points, 3 games of under 8, though, Matt. Can a championship team have him as a wide receiver 2 going forward?
Ooh, I thought you were going to say 3, and I was going to say absolutely 2. I'm a little bit it's rough.
Yeah,
but I think it's possible.
He's another guy, though, that nobody was expecting it, going to put him in as, going into the season and say, that's my wide receiver 2. So likely you are playing him in the 3rd or 4th spot among wide receivers in your lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's going to be more of a flex play for most of his owners right now, unless you're maybe a rebuilding team that caught fire and are now competing all of a sudden, he's probably going to be that lower end starter flex play for you. He's got nice matchups in weeks 12 and 14 against New Orleans and Green Bay. Things are a little bit tougher in 15 and 16 with Arizona and Carolina. I don't really like what we've seen from that offense the last couple of weeks sans Julio, except for Julio. But yeah, I wide receiver 2 is tough. Wide receiver 3, absolutely. Flex play, absolutely. Wide receiver 2, I don't know if I can get there.
The usage is what is holding him back. I'm convinced of it. We're still seeing Mohamed Sanu play almost all the time. Justin Hardy is close to him in snaps every week, and they're still feeding Austin Hooper, getting those running backs involved in the passing game. So, whether it's that coaching staff deciding they don't really want to trust a young guy to be on the field all the time, or something else, maybe it's something we don't know about in practice or anything really. He's not getting on the field enough to be truly trusted, especially as a wide receiver 2. Again, if you have him, you probably got him in your lineup unless you're stacked. I'm super. I don't have to say it. I'm super excited about his upside, and I think starting next year we're going to see the real Calvin Ridley. That route running is on point. I love it. Let's go to tight ends, Matt. We got to start with the big guy, Rob Gronkowski. The injury has made dynasty owners everywhere upset, anxious, really, about Gronk. They have the bye week. Even before the injury, however, only had 1 touchdown. That was in week 1. Just 1 game over 16.5 points on the season so far. I'm worried about Gronk. The trade rumors that were out there that he was going to go to the Lions in the offseason and threaten to retire, all that stuff. Bill Belichick knows when to move on from a player, and I really feel like he saw this coming. Now I'm very much invested in Gronk, and obviously if you have him, it's not like you're going to turn around and sell him right now if you're a contender. If you're a top 3 team in your league, you're hoping he comes back, renewed, re-energized to get back on the field with Tom Brady and have a nice run down the stretch here. I'm cautiously optimistic, but the cautiously is a big one here. Capital C on that, Matt.
Yeah, very disappointing. I've bought a few shares over the last couple of weeks, just kind of trying to buy low and buy that upside because that tight end position is so tough. And it seems like if you're gonna spend a little bit to get somebody with some upside, Gronk is the guy to do that with right now, especially for those title contenders. So despite the disappointment, despite the missing the games, I think I'm still buying on a contender just because of I truly think that he's kind of the guy who can win the week for you if he has one of these 2 touchdown games or whatever that and you have somebody starting a middle of the road tight end, then you have a huge point advantage there. It's one of the biggest edges I think you can get right now if you can find that huge producing tight end. So I'm scared. Don't get me wrong. I'm scared, but I'm still buying. There's been a lot of negative reports lately, like people being surprised if he's going to come back next year, all this stuff. We had these same stories last year. This year, it feels a little bit more real because he's missing time on the field. But I still think that if he's in the game, he has to be in your lineup unless you have Zach Ertz or Travis Kelce in addition to Gronk for some reason. But otherwise, I think if he comes back and is on the field, then he has to be in your lineup down the stretch.
Yeah, he's had a couple of clunkers. He had a 2 for 15. He had another that last week or the last time we saw him on the field in week 8, 3 for 43, a 4 for 44. Not big games, but he's still getting targets. He's still getting those looks. And at some point, again, regress to the mean, he's been a touchdown monster, almost scoring in every game of his career on average. He's going to come around to that again. And when they need a guy, and it appears in that offense that they need another guy outside of Julian Edelman and Josh Gordon, of course, that guy's going to be Gronk if he's healthy. It could happen as soon as week 12. They go to the Jets. And like you, I'm still optimistic. I wouldn't be shocked if he has a couple touchdowns and all the naysayers are very quiet very quickly.
I think I think it's possible, Dan, right now that if he's on a team that is not contending, I think it's even possible you could probably get him for an early second, maybe a second and a third, something like that. I think there's a chance that you don't even have to spend a first round pick to get him right now if you find the right team that has him. So poke around in your leagues.
Yeah, he's worth talking about for sure. And there's a chance, no doubt about it. I think most owners are still going to ask for that first, even if it's a late. But like you, if you're a true contender and you're starting a guy that is traditionally a bottom, low end, tight end 2, you can't get any production there. You're right. If he's on a non-contender, he's a guy to go talk to for sure. A guy that is moving in the other direction right now, George Kittle, a top 5 tight end and showing every week why he should be seen as that and maybe even more going forward. Man, he's looked good, Matt. You can trust that production to continue.
Yeah, I don't see why not. He's in a pretty talent deficient offense. He's clearly the number one target, no matter who the quarterback is. He's also, I guess, a guy I should have mentioned in the last segment about Gronk as somebody that you probably feel better about if you have, and it's certainly reasonable that you could have both Gronk and Kittle. So at that point, you're probably starting Kittle over Gronk until he shows something. So yeah, full speed ahead with Kittle. He's a guy I was definitely wrong on. We had him up to like tight end 7 or something in our off-season ADP last year in July, August. I guess this year, July, August. And I was pretty skeptical of it, was not buying. I was definitely selling at that price, but he's proven me wrong pretty much the entire season. So, yeah, start George Kittle rest of the way.
So if you're looking to buy Kittle right now, what do you think you got to give up?
Oh, gosh, I think you definitely have to give a late first. I think definitely, if not more,
if not more than that.
Yeah. I think if you had Gronk, I think you would have to add, an early second, maybe even a late first on top of Gronk, honestly.
Wow,
I wouldn't do it, but I think that the Kittle owner is going to say, "You're offering me Gronk. Why do I want Gronk? I've got Kittle, right. So make it worth my while."
Right. And to be honest, he's shown nothing that makes you think he's not worth that price tag and worth being named amongst those top 5, especially in Dynasty when you consider his youth and he's doing it with multiple quarterbacks now. Man, he looks good. If you watched on Monday night. Playing the Giants, he was all over the field, peppered with targets, making catches and tough catches. And I'm a fan of that guy coming out of Iowa. I was a fan then. I did not invest enough in him, even though he was so cheap. I guess that was my mistake. You mentioned Tyler Boyd as yours. Mine was Kittle a year and a half ago. Let's go back to the extreme veteran tight ends. We'll go over to Greg Olsen. He's the tight end 17, another guy. Tight end position we talked about, especially early in the season, littered with injuries. Olsen missed some time, hanging in there at tight end 17. I think we can still trust him to be at least a back end tight end 1 down the stretch here, Matt.
Oh, I agree. And this week against Detroit, start them against Detroit. This is going to be going to be a big game for all of the Panthers, especially after their disappointment last week. But Olsen may be number 1 on that list in terms of the passing game. So yeah, I think he's definitely a tight end 1 going forward. Maybe a fringe tight end 1. You have Jordan Reed, Eric Ebron, Jared Cook, those guys kind of down at the bottom of that tight end 1 tier. And I think Olsen slots in right there with them.
Right. And since he's returned in week 6, those 5 games, he hasn't had more than 76 receiving yards, but he scored touchdowns in 3 of those games. He's got that upside as that guy in the red zone that Cam looks to. We all know how valuable he's been to Cam and to fantasy owners everywhere over the last handful of seasons, really even more than that. Keep plugging him in there. He's a nice guy to have, and a guy that, because of his age, if you still have that trade deadline available to you, a guy that if he's on that team that struggled with injuries, including Olsen earlier, and are looking to add pieces, Olsen could be a nice guy to add and not have that price tag that we talked about with Kittle and Gronk. Those two tight ends in Indianapolis, Matt, Jack Doyle, and of course Eric Ebron, man, they got an embarrassment of riches, really, if you really look at the position across the league. Doyle is tight end 29, but injured until just a couple of weeks ago. Ebron right now, tight end 3. I'm sure everybody out there saw that coming. Since Doyle's return, both have traded big games, but had production in each of them for both of those guys. Who do you trust more in Indy, first of all, Matt? And how do you feel about trying to go get these guys if you have the chance to trade for a tight end?
I don't know why, and it's probably wrong, but I really just still don't trust Ebron. I know he keeps putting up these massive touchdown games, but I still think Doyle is the guy. He's out targeting him in pretty much every game they've played together. Doyle's had some bad luck in terms of a couple fumbles. One, he got almost had a touchdown last week, got taken down at the goal line, basically. So I just think we've gotten. It's probably totally a slight against Eric Ebron, honestly, but I feel like it's been a little bit fluky this year with the touchdowns. We've never seen it from him in the past. Maybe it was just that Detroit didn't use him that way, or he just wasn't ready to be that big producer, or he just had this near-death career experience now that he's had to leave that first team that drafted him so highly. So I don't know what it is, but I still want Doyle over him. Maybe Doyle is the floor play and Ebron is the ceiling play. Maybe you could angle it that way. But if I have to choose straight up between one or the other, I still want Jack Doyle.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. These two are a perfect example of the difference between floor and ceiling. Now, Doyle was shaking off a little rust in his first game back, or still in these first couple of games back. He did have a 6 for 70, followed that up this past week with a 3 for 36. I think if you're trying, kind of keeping with the theme with floor and ceiling, if you're trying to win a title right now, it would be hard to choose Doyle for me because of what Ebron has done, especially with those touchdowns. You need those splash plays to win leagues, those league or week winners, I've always kind of called them. And we've seen them multiple times already with the colossal disappointment that is Eric Ebron. He is making up for it right now. And if you need a splash to try to make to win a title, I've flipped. I was on the Doyle side, and really long term, if we're talking the next 2.5 seasons, I want Doyle. But if we're talking about the next 6 weeks, I think I want Ebron in that, especially that touchdown potential that you mentioned. It's
just so hard based on workload. You know, this past week, Ebron saw 38% of the snaps, Jack Doyle 87%. In week 8, 73% for Doyle and just 21.8% for Ebron. So it's I just think he's getting used in those high leverage situations and he's making good on it. But if he doesn't get those scores, I think we're really disappointed with what Ebron is going to bring to the table.
Right. And I haven't looked into those numbers. I don't know exactly where that usage is. It seems like Ebron is getting those looks, obviously, in the red zone. But those are the money plays, really. And with the landscape of tight end right now, the injuries there, the disappointments there, and just the lack of depth in general makes me feel like those guys with the touchdown potential more than any position, and it's probably been this way for quite a while, at tight end, I want that potential. Let's go to the quarterback position quickly, Matt, before we wrap things up right now. I wanted to mention Mitchell Trubisky. We've been kind of hard on Trubisky on this show, and he's been up and down, of course, a young guy, but quarterback 6 right now. And those up and down numbers, while they exist, those up numbers, man, they're really good. He has a high ceiling, a lot like Eric Ebron. Are you trusting him in a 1 quarterback league to be your starter every week going forward?
That's a big ask, I think. He's clearly putting up fantasy points, and I know everybody's comparing him to Bortles, but I think it kind of is, because he doesn't look great on the field. He had that one really nice throw to Allen Robinson for a touchdown, a couple other pretty good throws to Anthony Miller, but he was off target just as much as he was on target, in my opinion, in the last few games, in these big games. I think this was definitely the best game of his career, both maybe not from a stat perspective, because he had that 6 touchdown game. I think it was back against Tampa Bay earlier in the season. But I don't know. I just don't think he's very good. Maybe he's going to be like Bortles and put up fantasy points and still not be good. He has a fine set of matchups coming up. This week against Detroit is probably going to be another big game for, Minnesota this week. So in week 12 against Detroit, it's going to be probably a big game. And then week 16, he's get San Francisco. So it's hard to argue that he could potentially win a title for somebody at the quarterback position, but I don't know about trustworthy. I think that's the word for me with him. I still don't trust him.
Yeah, I think I trust him, but it's as a streamer. 3 of his 9 games have been relative duds, really. He has 3 games with 1 or less touchdown passes. The big games have inflated those numbers. He has a few of those as well. Now, if you're a gambler, I guess, you can roll him out there every week. But I'm leery of the Minnesota matchup. I'm leery of the Rams matchup. By then, they may be a little healthier. Obviously, he's got some good ones as well. You should have a second quarterback on your roster if you're a true contender. And if we're talking about super flex, you're putting him in your lineup because of that upside. But in a single quarterback league, I'm not ready. Like you, Matt, I'm not ready to commit to him for the entirety of the rest of your season. Seems risky to me for sure. Let's go to Matt Ryan, the veteran that's putting up the big numbers, quarterback 2 right now, consistently been a quarterback 1 each week, really all season. It seems like Matt Ryan is at least close to the level that he was back when he won his MVP a couple years ago. Matt, how do you feel about Ryan as your guy down the stretch?
I think I'm fine with it. I think I would trust him over Trubisky for sure. Maybe a lower ceiling, I guess, just based on how that Atlanta team is performing, which is pretty disappointing overall. I guess more of it's on the defensive side, but Ryan's thrown for 300 yards in his last 4 games, basically. So I don't know how you can't necessarily trust him. He's got great weapons. It seems like this team should be a lot better than they are. But yeah, I think he's right there in that middle of the pack of that end of that quarterback 1 tier, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I feel a little bit differently, I guess, than you do. Those yardage numbers that you mentioned, if you go look at his stat sheet, it's really unreal, the consistency of them. He has a couple of one touchdown games, but he's completing a lot of passes, a lot like he did a few years ago. He's throwing the ball down the field a lot like he did in that MVP season. He seems to have returned to form, and as long as Julio Jones is there, those other options stay at least relatively healthy, and they have some semblance of a running game, which I guess at the very most you can say is average at this point. If that's at least average, that offensive line continues to protect him, I feel really good about trotting him out there every week. Now, maybe in a horrible matchup, which really he doesn't have many. He's got to play Baltimore here in a few weeks. And I think he has Carolina in the championship week 16. Outside of that, not a lot of real landmines for Matt Ryan. So if you have to depend on him going forward, I think you can feel at least safe that he's going to go for around 250 and all the way up to 400, and probably throw at least a couple of touchdown passes for you. And even in a 1 quarterback league, that's a guy that I want in my starting lineup. I guess that'll do it this week. Matt, any wise wisdom for the listeners before we let them go?
Yeah, guys, trade deadline is coming up this week in a lot of leagues. Hopefully this episode will be out before your trade deadline is up, but it's time. It's time to make moves. If you're a contender, it's time to solidify that depth, maybe add another piece to your starting lineup if you can. If you're not, and not competing, do the reverse, sell those pieces to those competitors and get something for your money before we hit this coming off season. Give yourself some assets that are going to appreciate a little bit if you're on these rebuilding teams. Now's the time to act. Pretty soon it's going to be over with. So before we know it, 3 games we got left here till the fantasy playoffs, and then it's back to dynasty mode. It's back to looking at these rookies. So enjoy the rest of the season, go make some moves, and let's knock it out of the park the rest of the way.
And if I could add anything to just a plea, really, at this point, this week I got a bunch of emails about those trades that you were talking about. Hey, what do you want for Rob Gronkowski? I don't know what league this guy is talking about. I'm in 16 leagues. I don't know what his team name is in that league. When you email an owner or even a commissioner, Ryan's a commissioner of many leagues. We both commission as well. Add your team name in the league you're talking about. Please, it should be standard practice. I had multiple messages like this, and on the last couple, I just had to ask them. I wasn't willing to go search. So yeah, I guess it's more of a want than any kind of advice or anything like that. But it is a common courtesy, and we all appreciate it for sure. For Matt, I'm Dan. We'll get Ryan back with us again next week to talk more about the upcoming playoffs and, of course, what happened in Week 11 and what happened in Week 11 and what to expect in Week 12. Thanks for listening to this episode of the DLF Dynasty Podcast. We'll catch you next week.
Nice work, Dan.
I thought it went pretty good, actually. I was a little leery. I thought, I hope we get to 45, and we hit an hour.
Yeah.
That's good.
We can always stretch it out. We got enough bullshit to talk about.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. All right, 3:32.
I got down to 132 feet in the canyon this dive trip.
Oh, yeah?
Saw a couple horn sharks, a bunch of big fish, bait ball.
So you're going to have to...
That's basically that's basically the limit of recreational diving. Like anything below that, really, you have to bring in different oxygen mixes to be able to off gas on your way up. So it's basically as deep as you can go safely without a more technical kind of gear.
I see. And that's drastically different than the depths you've been at in the past?
Oh, no, I've been there before, but it's not like a regular occurrence. Usually you're in it depends on where you're diving really, but most of the stuff to see is in like the 30 to, 60 to 80 foot range. But sometimes you just want to go deep because once you get below 100 feet, this thing called nitrogen narcosis kicks in, and it kind of feels like you're drunk a little bit. So it's kind of fun. But also, I guess, if you don't know what you're doing, kind of dangerous. But
yeah, no, that sounds cool.
Like during our dive training, they took us down there and then like gave us like this puzzle we had to do and like timed us on how fast we could do it like on the surface versus at under 100 feet or deeper than 100 feet. It's pretty fun.
How'd that turn out?
Not great for the one underwater. Yeah, surprisingly enough.
Not great. Could have been better.
It's like I don't know. I guess everybody's tolerance is different, but for me, it was probably like 3 to 4 beers, maybe. Felt
okay,
like, and it comes on like instantly almost. It's not like a slow roll, I guess.
Oh,
it's just like all of a sudden you feel all kind of messed up. Yeah,
I suppose some people get like sick from that.
Yeah, there's people that, you definitely can get sick from it for sure. And then you can only be down at that depth for just a few minutes. Otherwise, then you start thinking about getting nitrogen bubbles in your blood. And I don't know if you know what the bends are, but that's kind of a big dive term where if you are down too long or don't decompress or don't or surface too quickly, you can get these bubbles in your bloodstream and it's bad. You have to go in a hyperbaric chamber for days.
Oh, I have heard of that. Yeah. So this is like a regular hobby of yours. You do it
less frequently the last few years because my wife has turned into kind of a warm water, only like tropical diving, kind of a wuss a little bit because the water temperature here is like, 60s, low 50s, can get down to low 50s depending on how deep you go. So you have to wear these big 7 mil, these really big, thick wetsuits that are difficult to move in, difficult to put on. It's not the most comfortable thing. So I get it, but
in the tropical stuff, it's in the 70s, so you can wear a skin tight one or whatever. Even warmer.
You like in Hawaii, you don't even wear anything really. Maybe a rash guard for like in case you brush up against some coral or something like that. But much warmer there, and honestly more enjoyable diving. Here in cold water, you have limited visibility. Like a good day is you can see about 20 feet. In the tropics, you can see for miles basically. So, but yeah, it's kind of taken a toll on the number of dives I've gotten to do recently.
But it was a big deal to you before, huh?
Yeah, in college we would dive. We alternated weekends kind of. One weekend would be skiing in Tahoe, and the other weekend would be diving in Monterey. So I have I don't remember exactly, but a few hundred dives over the last 20 years, I guess. So. Cool. I don't know where you would go diving there. Maybe you have some quarries or something, some lakes or
here in town, in the town that I live in. It's called Sodak, South Dakota Scuba, and they do all that stuff. And I've thought about. I actually asked my wife once, wouldn't that be cool to go do one time? And she was not on board. I'm like, it's really like here it'd be. I don't even know. I never even looked into it. I don't know what you would do. You go to the river or what?
Yeah, lakes. A lot of like inland states, they have big quarries that are now just big bodies of water that they do training in and stuff. But probably not very exciting in terms of things to see.
I'm sure really boring actually.
Yeah,
like there's not. But like if I ever went on went to Hawaii, that'd be like high on the list to do. Somebody with me would have to be like I'd make sure I had somebody with me that would want to do that together.
You'd have to get certified, So
really?
That's kind of the hiccup. Yeah, you have to take this. Well, it's different in the tropics. Like you can usually get certified within a few days, but like a regular dive class is generally like, because there's classroom sessions and then there's pool sessions and then there's ocean sessions or whatever that you signed off.
He handles the dogs in the state that search for dead bodies and stuff too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing. But he certifies people. I thought you could go with somebody certified, but
no, you can't. But you can do this other thing called SNUBA, where it's basically like a regulator or an air compressor on the surface on a raft, and you have a hose with a regulator in it, like you would be diving, but you can only go deep, obviously, as long as the hose is. So a little bit different, but at least to see if you like it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. 331, you said? No, 332.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want me to take next week or do you want it again?
Let me think.
So it's Thanksgiving, so you're probably busier than I am.
I will be.
I guess it's not Thanksgiving yet, but it's, the weekend before. Or would you rather I take it the weekend after?
Isn't this week the weekend before?
Yes, this coming week is the weekend before. Yeah. So would you rather take it this week and then have me do it the week after Thanksgiving, weekend after? Or which one would you be busier on?
Well, I'll be super busy Thanksgiving and the day after, and even that Sunday.
Why don't you do next week and then I'll do the one after?
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay, you all set then?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, buddy.
Yep, no sweat. It was a good episode. It was kind of fun to go back to me and you for
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, but those were always good episodes in the past. So
yeah, we had more episodes in the past where the third person didn't show up. So
right,
we'll tell Ryan it's at a different time next week or something.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, dude. Have a good
later,
night.
bud.
Bye.